So delighted to join you. Really thrilled for the opportunity. Thank you for the invite and looking forward to sharing some goodies with you all and answering questions about the program. I see there are many candidates in the program now. That's great to see. I'm going to give you some context that maybe you haven't seen before in terms of data about the CFA program, but also give you some perspectives on it as well in terms of why people do it and what we teach you throughout the full three-level experience. So I'm going to share my screen here and I'm going to show a quick PowerPoint we're going to go through. Here we go. Okay, so please put questions in the chat, by the way, at the top of your Zoom. I'm going to answer them at the end of this presentation. I'm going to talk for about 25 minutes or so. I'm going to breeze through the materials. I'll ask Mona to share them afterwards, by the way, so you don't need to, if you miss a slide, don't worry, you'll get the materials. So let's dive in. CFA Institute, as I think many of you are aware, what we do is essentially our mission is to lead the investment profession globally by promoting a robust and rigorous standard of ethics, education, and professional excellence for the ultimate benefit of society. So that's our mission. So everything we do at CFA Institute ties in with that mission. In terms of strategy, the thing that's relevant to us here today is developing future professionals. That's essentially what the CFA program and our other credential programs are doing. In terms of scale and scope, this is the mix of our members globally. You'll see that we have most members in the Americas, which is our kind of heritage market, over half. Looking at the Asia Pacific, we have 22 societies and about 1 in 5 members are based in the APAC region, including Australasia. In terms of recognition, we have we actually have a lot more than 170,000 charter holders now, more like 190,000 across 150 countries. So it's extremely ubiquitous around the world. And as you embark on your careers, you'll go to various meetings, see various reports. You'll essentially see it everywhere, no matter which financial center you go to in the world. You'll bump into charter holders. You'll see research reports with the credential after people's name. You'll go to conferences and you'll see it as well. In fact, we're the single biggest kind of 3-letter acronym after people's names in finance, because people tend not to use the MBA, or some do, some don't, but most charter holders do use CFA. And that's why you'll see it most frequently, more frequently than anything else in institutional finance. In terms of candidate numbers, you'll see here's the trend. About 250,000 people go through it each year. And of that mix, it's kind of the flip of the member side. So Asia Pacific, over half of all candidates in the program are in your area there. So you see very strong growth really since the 60s. There was a dip there in the pandemic, now recovering fairly strongly. So that's kind of the trend. So it's very much a rocket ship of the CFA program. So I'm going to answer 4 questions very briefly, keep it pretty light, and show some data to you. The 4 questions are: who's got the charter? And I'll make it relevant to your area. Why people embark on the program. I'll tell you why I did the CFA program 20 years ago. Give you a flavor of what it covers. So level 1 candidates can see kind of full soup to nuts what they're going to see in levels 2 and 3. And then, of course, I'll talk about CFA program exam logistics, some quite interesting updates, things you won't know in terms of what we're doing in your region. So to begin, who's got the charter? So we've actually got a nice set of maps. I'm going to share the link with you in the PowerPoint, but let's go to it here. So essentially, this map lets us see how many charter holders there are in each area and what are the main firms. So New York State, for example, 13,000 charter holders, and the top employers: Barclays, BlackRock, B of A, etc. You can actually go to Australia here and New Zealand. And so in Australia, Commonwealth Bank of Australia, NAB, and so on and so forth. So it's a pretty cool tool you can use to actually see where people work who have the CFA Charter, no matter what country you look at. So it's a really cool tool. If you're planning to maybe work somewhere else, you can actually see where charter holders work in other regions as well. So it's quite an interesting way to see what sort of jobs people have who have the charter. Top global employers, this is the list. This is the top 20. You'll see it really breaks down into insurance companies like Allianz, sell-side investment banks like Bank of America, and also buy-side shops as well. Firms like Fidelity, for example, Fidelity Investments. So they're kind of the big three buckets of the major employers. We actually have close to 20,000 employers. Our charter holders work at close to 20,000 employers, by the way. So it's really most institutions globally have at least one CFA charter holder. So what do? Another great infographic that I'll share with you here. We call it Bubble Quad. And what it does, it breaks out the institutional space into 4 buckets, into sell side in the top right, buy side in the top left, corporate in the bottom left, and advisory in the bottom right. So you hover over the bubbles and see what people do. So on the sell side, the biggest job charter holders do is sell side equity research analyst. So about 18,000 charter holders do that. They do things like cover stocks like Tesla and so on and so forth, and write initiation notes and quarterly updates and so on. On the buy side, the biggest bubble is portfolio manager. That includes hedge fund manager. This really is the core of our member base, people who manage money. So 33,000 PMs globally. That's a good proportion of the total universe of portfolio managers, by the way. And in corporate, private equity general partner is very big. People tend not to do the charter at a private equity general partner like a Blackstone, but they find their way there through their career. So that's how people wind up there who have the charter. And then in advisory, you have corporate finance and accounting. So quite a few investment bankers actually surprisingly have it. They don't do the charter when they're in investment banking. Typically, they wind up in investment banking. So that shows you how the charter is somewhat of a passport to different job roles through finance. But you'll see there are so many different jobs charter holders do: manager of managers, sales, credit analyst, CFO, and so on and so forth. So it's a lot of fun kind of skimming through this and seeing the kind of opportunities that are available to charter holders around the world. So that's the role mix of charter holders. And actually, let's look in your region, actually. So I'm going to go to Bloomberg quickly, and I'm going to go to what's called the People Database, or PEOP. If you're familiar with Bloomberg, type in PEOP. It's got a really cool filter for education. So if I come down to the filter down here and type in CFA into certificate, Chartered Financial Analyst, you'll see that there are 55,000, about a quarter of charter holders are listed on the Bloomberg terminal. And what you can do, you can filter it. You can say, right, I want to see charter holders in Sydney, for instance. There you go. And there are 420. That doesn't mean there are 420 charter holders in Sydney. It means that the 420 on the Bloomberg who are in Sydney. And you can alphabetize the firm and see where they work. You can even click in and learn more about those individuals. It's all on the Bloomberg terminal, and see news and what they do and so on and so forth, and professional background, even contact them. So you'll see that some people still have green dots there. I could instant message them if I wanted to, right? So it's actually a really good networking tool. And what you'll find is when you have something in common with them and you reach out to them, they're much more likely to engage with you. And I can, in the spirit of kind of going to the different areas here, let's go to Perth real quick. This won't have many people because, again, it's a slender mix, but you will see some names you might recognize. If you're in the Perth region, you'll certainly see some employers you recognize when you look down the employer list there. If I go to Auckland, same deal. I'll see, a good mix of where people work who have the charter in New Zealand as well. So I do recommend that, especially if you're networking in your city, or even going to another city and looking for people to meet up with. Then it's a great tool to actually skim the charter holder database. Okay, great. Next question: why do people embark on the CFA program? Let's kind of show some data here. So people view it as the gold standard, and you'll see lots of comments in the press talking about how tough it is and how it's a passport in finance and so on and so forth. But these are the kind of the key reasons people do it. They definitely view it as the gold standard. It's the ubiquitous credential in finance. People like the ethical core to the CFA Charter. It's got that global passport nature. It's a great networking tool, as you saw on the Bloomberg terminal. That's another key reason people do it. It's a great icebreaker with people across the financial centers. But I spoke to about just over 300 charter holders back in 2020. And I had interviews with them, pretty open-ended. And I asked them, why did you embark on the CFA program? And I took great notes and listened. It wasn't a survey with like check boxes. And then I took my notes back here and I went through them and tried to kind of cluster and tease out the common themes. And then I categorized the key reasons people gave. And you'll see at the top there, the number one reason people do the program is signaling value. You're signaling to an employer that you're really smart and hardworking, essentially, and have passion for the industry and are willing to sacrifice some of your time in order to improve yourself to work in finance. So that's a key reason. Value for money, it's $3,000 essentially the whole program. Compared to an MBA, that's a fraction of what you might pay for an MBA in finance, and that's certainly compelling for many people. In finance, people view it as somewhat of a prerequisite. If you're on the sell side, want to get to the buy side, it's a great way to signal that you're interested and ready to make that switch and so on. So you can see they're kind of the main reasons people do it. It's really about signaling. So we have a great brand, people recognize it, it's there on the top of your resume, on your business card, and you're sending a signal when you have the three letters after your name. I'm going to skip through some slides in the interest of time here. Let's talk about this slide here, which is this individual says that the reason he did the charter was because there are so many different products. Certainly, this is why I did the CFA program. I started in the year 2000. I was an equity research analyst in London. And what you'll find in finance, you'll always be put into a little niche, no matter what you do. You'll be covering ETFs, you'll be covering corporate bonds or government bonds, you'll be covering certain currencies. And what you find is you get into these silos and you actually don't understand the other asset classes. So as an equity analyst, I didn't know anything about fixed income or derivatives. And so one of the key reasons people do the program is to learn across the asset classes, foundational knowledge, which is quite important, actually. An equity analyst does actually need to know about fixed income. They typically don't teach you about it at the training sessions, but you need to know about interest rates and the yield curve and spreads and so on. And actually, it's a great way to acquire that knowledge, is to go through the structured CFA program. Also, in terms of competencies, we teach you some of the key things like portfolio construction or valuation is the number one thing people come away from the program with. So it's not just about asset classes, it's about specific skill sets you need as well. And people value the fact that charter holders tend to get paid a premium. So on the right hand side, we can see this is US data that when you look across credentials, people with the CFA designation have on average higher earnings than people who say do the accounting credentials, by way of example. Okay, let's talk about the CFA program itself, the content. Some of you will be familiar with all of this because you're a level 3 candidate, I saw on the survey, but some of you won't be. And I'll probably bring out some other things that none of you will be aware of as well. So the target market is really for generalists early in their career, as I think many, if not most of you will by now know. So we're really targeting what is the foundational knowledge really in the first few years of your career. And that's what we're trying to teach you. Essentially, what are the key things you need to know in order to have threshold competence in finance? We continuously evolve the curriculum. So my first job at CFA Institute was called practice analysis. So I managed the skeleton of the CFA program and tried to figure out where we should go next in terms of things to add to it. So in the end of 2019, for instance, I added geopolitics to the curriculum. It was very clear that was an emerging area of importance that could move asset prices. And so we launched that into level 1 actually for calendar 2023 curriculum. So that's a great example of how we see trends in the marketplace and then reflect them into the curriculum. And so when we look through time, this is the innovation grid of the CFA program across different competency areas. And so you can see some of the things that popped in certain decades. So at the top there, in the 1980s, Michael Porter at Harvard came out with Porter's 5 Forces, which is a classic framework analysts use still to this day. Across asset classes, in the 1990s in Canada, They launched ETFs in the early 90s, and now they're very popular. So we really do look around the world to see, what are the new techniques, what are the new asset classes, what are the new frameworks people use, and so on. What finance theories do people need to know, and we add it to the CFA program. So that's how the program stays up to date. It follows, it shadows the finance industry by actually seeing what people are doing in their day-to-day jobs and incorporating it into the CFA program. We also keep you up to date. When you get the charter, you have the refresher readings. So you can continue to see how the program is being updated even when you get the charter. It's the single most popular thing we provide to members. People always want to know, how's the program changed? People always ask me, hey, what's new in the program? So we serve that. And so you don't stop learning once you finish level 3. This is a bit of fun. You can play with this in your own time, essentially. Essentially, when you look at the program, you find it maps quite closely to things people talk about in finance as well. So one thing I'm quite pleased with on the right-hand side, we did a survey, what are the best finance films of all time? And we actually mapped it to the CFA program. So The Big Short came out on top, and you can see how, it talks about credit default swaps, which is in the CFA program, right? Or market efficiency and so on and so forth. And so we map these movies to the program, and you can actually play with that yourself with a link you'll receive. So you'll see it's very obviously relevant to the things people talk about, not just on the desk, but also socially in finance. Now, here's a great example I want to share with you. On the ESG front, obviously, climate change is becoming, I know it's been a big topic in Australia, but in recent months, in Europe now is basking in a heat wave. And it's becoming very apparent that you have to understand climate change to be an analyst these days, to look at things like physical risk, transition risk, and so on. And what we noticed is that on LinkedIn, lots of jobs demand ESG skills, but job postings, but very few people actually have them, which is why CFA Institute actually embarked on a journey to actually acquire an ESG credential, which we did, and actually incorporate these things into the CFA program as well. So this is a great example of how we spotted something on Wall Street and put it in the program. This is again back in 2019. Bloomberg came out with a spreadsheet on their spreadsheet library that tracked the carbon dioxide intensity of your portfolio. So it weighted the portfolio in terms of carbon dioxide output divided by revenue of all the securities. This is now standard practice on Wall Street, by the way. It's called carbon intensity. And so we saw this extremely popular thing Bloomberg put out, and it became apparent to us this was going to be core workflow of a PM. So it's just a great example of how we spot trends in the marketplace, looking at platforms like Bloomberg and seeing what's getting a lot of clicks and so on, and then putting it in the program itself. So and most people are now aware of carbon intensity tracking on the portfolio, benchmarking your portfolio against the index. Does it emit more or less carbon dioxide and so on? Let's talk about exam logistics just to wrap up here and finish right on time. I'm not going to dwell too much on this. I suspect most of you know this, although some of you may have a foot in the paper-based world and maybe haven't done a computer-based exam just yet. So I'll talk a bit about that. But here's the structure of the CFA program for those in particular level 1, level 2. This will be new to you perhaps. But really, level 1 is about the tools. It's about the basics, learning how accounting works, economic backdrop of interest rates and currencies and so on. Level 2 is about single security valuation, basically. And level 3 is actually looking then at portfolio analytics, risk and portfolio construction. So that's how the program is structured. It's quite a nice flow. Tools are used throughout, and then single security analysis is then used to construct the portfolio in level 3. So that's a structure we've now had for about 30 years. It's a great structure that stood the test of time. In terms of becoming a charter holder, here's how it works. You do need to acquire 4,000 hours of qualified professional work experience. After you pass level 3, once you've acquired that, you need 2 or 3 references who attest to your work, and then you apply for membership and become a charter holder. So that's how it works. Logistically, the exams, you've got to do the exams and also accrue the necessary work experience. Computer-based testing, those of you who have not been through the exam yet, it's 2.25 hour sessions. Level 1, 180 multiple choice questions. Level 2, 88 item sets. and level 3 is constructive response and item set. In terms of the exam day experience, for those who haven't yet been to the computer-based testing center, it's in a prometric testing center. You can bring your calculator, of course. There is an optional break, which I highly recommend you take. It's quite taxing to sit there, even for 2¼ hours answering these questions. You'll need a break. And so your overall appointment time will take about 4½ hours. Sorry, 5½ hours, I beg your pardon, when you include the checking in and the pledge, the optional break. You'll be in the test center about 5½ hours. This is where we are globally. We moved from paper-based testing, that's the green dots, to computer-based, that's the yellow dots. And so you'll see where we are. We're pretty much everywhere, very dense in the USA, in Europe, in particular China. Looking down under, you can see where we are. We're really in 4 Australian cities and 2 New Zealand cities for now. I will let you know that we are opening next in Adelaide in Australia. And in a few weeks, we'll be opening in Christchurch in New Zealand. So going to the South Island for the first time. So people who used to have to fly or get the boat up to Wellington will no longer have to do that if they wish. And they can actually do the test on South Island. We're not done yet either. We do have another fairly obvious idea for Australia. I won't let the cat out the bag, but there are a couple of fairly obvious places we're going to go next in Australia. So we're not yet done densifying the exam network, we're very pleased to say. This is what the exam rooms are like for those who haven't been in there. The one recommendation I'll give to you is dress in layers. It is air conditioned, and some people say it's a bit cold. So do dress in layers, but it's a wonderfully conducive environment. When you go to these centers, you just focus on the exam itself. So I'm very happy with the environments we serve up for the test. Here's the screen for those who haven't seen it yet. There's a tutorial countdown clock. You always see the countdown clock at the top of the screen. Very easy to go forward, backwards. You can flag questions for later review and go back to them at the end if you wish. So it's a really intuitive environment, very straightforward, and so you can just focus on getting the answers right. Learning ecosystem, for those who haven't dug in, this is where you need to come to do your mock exams. I'm assuming many or most of you have seen this. If not, I do recommend it. Maybe you're using a prep provider. I still recommend coming here because the question workflow is really slick and it's the official questions. Also, it is the pathway to the mock. Almost everybody does the official mock exam. This is where you come to do it. Obviously, save it till a few days before the exam, but come here to do that mock. It has a mobile. It remembers where you are between devices and so on, as you'd expect. So it's proving to be fairly popular with candidates, the learning ecosystem. How do you succeed? Essentially, most people take about 4 years to get through the CFA program, roughly. They report spending 300 hours per level. That's pretty much how long I spent on each level. And actually what's different from my time is there's the formal curriculum that we used to have to buy books back in the year 2000, but from 2006, 2008 onwards, we have the official curriculum. You can also purchase the print book if you wish from Wiley as well. So that's the modality, the digital platform, or get the book from Wiley. Of course, many people use prep providers as well. Go to the candidate resource page. This is where you get access to the mock exams in the bottom left down there. So just before you sit the exam, do it in the days running up to the exam. Exam schedule, here we go. Let's look at 2023. That's the kind of permanent structure here. We offer level 1 4 times a year, level 2 May, August, November, and we offer level 3 just twice a year. In February and August. So that's how the permanent structure will be of the exam windows. Member checklist, I'll leave this for you to look at. It's perhaps not as relevant for you at this point in time, given the fact that you're all candidates in the program now, but at the back of the PowerPoint, which Mona will share, you can see about applying for membership and also affiliate membership to societies. So I will pause there, and I'm happy to take any questions. So let me go up to the Zoom and look at what we have there in terms of the questions here. So let me go from the top. Couple of questions. What are some suggestions for candidates who are currently in a non-finance role looking to break into the finance industry? Well, certainly you're doing the right thing, embarking on the CFA program. That's a great signal. I would say take a look at this PowerPoint. Look at that bubble quad I shared with you to see the kind of job opportunities available, certainly. If you've not yet cracked the industry, what you need to find is an opening, an entry-level opening. And so the kind of the classic areas where people go to entry level tend to be M&A, mergers and acquisitions, or accounting. They're two classic ways in. Sell-side equity research that's where I started my career. That's also a classic way in. There are perhaps fewer openings than there were in my day there, but they still very much exist. Market data is a great industry where you get exposed to the industry. Places like Bloomberg and FactSet have big entry-level programs as well, which is a great way to get exposed to all the different kind of institutions. You'll be visiting them when you work for those firms, certainly. So they're kind of some of the key ones, I would say. So it's accounting, investment banking, sell-side research, and market data. And then you need to, explore the opportunities, go to info sessions, network with people. So my biggest tip is, let's say you went to Massey in New Zealand or whatever, I'm just making it up, right? So go on the Bloomberg or LinkedIn and ping people who work for firms of interest to you and ask them for an informational. Here's the golden rule: never ask them for a job. You'll make them kind of uncomfortable for whatever reason. So the key thing is just to have an informational with them. And if there are opportunities, they will tell you. Right, so just ask about what it's like to work in industry, what their journey was. So here's a little tip: everybody loves talking about themselves, so get them talking about themselves. And so networking is absolutely key. And the main platform you're going to use perhaps is LinkedIn. Always reach out to people you have something in common with. You went to the same school as you grew up in the same town, whatever. But then if you're a candidate, magically you can reach out to charter holders. And they are more likely to come back to you. So that's a great tip. Use the Bloomberg. Type in CFA in the education field and filter to your city and reach out maybe with a Bloomberg message. The cool thing about Bloomberg message is no one ever emails them on it to network with them. So you'll find they're probably going to respond to your email. So yeah, there's some tips for you. Next question. There are many non-finance candidates who are unable to meet the work experience criteria to gain the charter. Will CFA be looking at alternate chartering pathways for such candidates? So I think it's important to understand the actual criteria we have. So you don't actually, you need to be involved with the investment process somehow to get those 4,000 hours, but you can be pretty tangential. So for example, if you work at an accounting firm and you create the accounts for a company, that is part of the investment process because the accounts are used by the analysts to value these securities, right? So what you'll find is it's quite broad net to get the experience. We do require that you have something to do with the investment process because the charter, after all, is the professional designation for people who work in institutional finance. But what you'll find is it covers, it's perhaps broader than you think in terms of the things we do allow and permit to accrue those 4,000 hours. Internships count as well, for instance. So I think you might be surprised when you dig in and look at the rules and figure out what does and doesn't count. So yeah, a great example is accounting counts. So if you work in an accounting firm, that's certainly a key way many people accrue the experience. Next question. Has there been any study done comparing non-financial background candidates versus financial background candidates in terms of the study hours? So we've actually looked at the degree subject of people who embark on the CFA program. And it's funny, when you look at the mix, it's about 40% of all candidates are finance or business majors, so they did undergrad in finance and business. About 25% are economics undergraduates. So what you're up to now, you're up to a good portion now. And then you have mathematics, you have engineering, a little bit of law, and so on and so forth. And then you've got a tiny computer science even. So it mostly is kind of finance or STEM. And accordingly, if you're finance or STEM, you have no problem getting through the program. You have the mathematical background and so on. So we actually don't have many people who are truly non-financial. Those that are non-financial tend to be scientists, chemists, and so on. So we really don't have many. So I would say that in terms of hours, they're going to be broadly similar. Certainly people who have done a finance undergrad or a Bachelor in Commerce probably have, they've seen some stuff before. I think in the case where someone's truly a career switcher into finance from, say, history, yes, they're probably going to have to study harder than other people, but there aren't many people in that category in truth. So have we done a study? No. Will they have to study harder? Yes. In terms of how much, I think the question is how much quantitative stuff have they done? There's not a very hard mathematics in the CFA program, but there's a lot of calculation. So if you're not comfortable with calculation, it's gonna be harder for you than other people. Next question, got a good few minutes here. Someone says you can also start in investment operations and then transition to research or other investment roles. That's another avenue. Yeah, great point. So actually risk is an area that hires quite a few people. Risk and actually performance measurement in an asset manager. So doing the NAV reports on a fund and so on. They do hire people. Actually, very few undergrads actually know about performance measurement. They know about risk and middle office, but not performance measurement. So that's a classic area where they hire, and they'll be quite surprised you know about it actually when you reach out and figure out that team, and they'll probably be quite delighted to hire you actually. And certainly in performance measurement, we see people doing the CFA Charter in order to get a role in the front office. So we do see that quite frequently. We also see private wealth actually as well. So private wealth, so that's dealing with high net worth individuals or mass affluence. That's a booming industry globally right now. And it counts for work experience, by the way. They're actually hiring a lot of people. Now, those roles tend to be more sales oriented, but it's quite common for people. It's actually a single biggest segment in America now of new level 1 candidates. Let's have a couple of final questions to wrap up here. Do you have any suggestions with typing formulas for computer-based exam for level 3 morning session? We're going to share some news in the coming weeks. We're actually doing away with the formula editor in level 3. It's actually not necessary. We actually don't mark formulae in level 3. You don't need to do that in order to pass level 3, and we're doing away with the formula editor. So I think that kind of moots that question somewhat. You'll be learning more about that in the coming weeks. So the February 2023 level 3 exam will not have the formula editor. Final question here. From your own, actually there are two questions. From your own experience and engagement with candidates, would you have a recommended time split between active studying, reading curriculum versus doing practice questions for level 3? Yeah, so I go back and forth a lot with the big prep providers. And the number one thing they tell candidates is spend more time doing practice questions and less time reading the curriculum. So in fact, they advocate doing close to a 50-50 split, because the questions are the real deal. That's the actual experience in the exam room. You don't read the curriculum in the exam room, right? So what they find is candidates spend too long reading the curriculum and too little time doing questions. And so given the fact there are so many questions available in the learning ecosystem and so on, and actually with the prep provider as well, you can happily spend as much time as you like in questions. But remember, questions are the real deal. So yes, I would recommend spending about 40% of your time doing practice questions. Are those 180 multiple choice questions evenly spread across 6 books? So that's the question about level 1. Have a look at the domain weights on our website. And actually the books, you can see which domains they pertain to, and you can actually answer that question yourself. So the domain weights show the split of the 180 multiple choice questions. I think we're done for questions, right on time. It's been a pleasure being here. I'm going to hang out in the background. I'm really interested in this meeting, and I'm up now anyway, so I'll be working away. So it's been a real pleasure talking with you about the CFA program. Mona will share the materials with you all. And if there are any more questions, far away, but if not, I will be here and looking forward to hearing the rest of the presentation.
I'm sorry, Rob, just at this point, I think there was another question, and we just have a couple more minutes before we start. So
Sure.
I think Harry had put on a question here. Did I see that? Are those 180 multiple choice questions even spread across the 6 books? I think.
Yeah, they are. They are spread across the 6 books. Yeah. So in fact, I've got the books behind me here. So yeah, level book number 1, quantitative methods. Book 2, econ and financial statement, and so on and so forth. And so you look at the domain weights. And you add the domain weights versus what it says on the spine of the book, and that tells you the split of the questions in the exam.
That's great. Harry just got his answers as well. Thank you so much, Rob. It's been really insightful, and I look forward to having those slides. And I'm sure the rest of the candidates in Australia and New Zealand have certainly benefited from the sharing that all this presentation that you had today. Thank you.